Mary kneels outside her own home, watching flames devour everything she thought was real. Her marriage certificate, her identity, her proof. Behind her, three men laugh as they tear up documents and toss them into the fire. Mana's father, brother, and cousin. They just told her the truth. She was never legally married. 10 years of her life, erased in minutes. They're celebrating her destruction like it's a victory. But what they don't know is that Mary kept one copy they'll never find, and the woman they think they just erased is about to become their worst nightmare. Do you think Mana's family deserves what's coming? Drop a like if yes, and subscribe to see justice served. Minutes earlier, Mary had walked up the front steps with 2 bags of groceries in her hands. The house had been quiet when she left that morning, peaceful even. She thought Mana was at work. She thought his family was miles away, minding their own business like they usually did. But the moment she opened the door, she knew something was wrong. Shouting echoed from the backyard, male voices, loud and cruel, laughter that didn't sound right. Then came the smell, sharp, acidic, smoke. Mary set the bags down on the kitchen counter, her pulse already quickening. She moved through the hallway slowly, her footsteps careful, her breath shallow. The closer she got to the back door, the louder the voices became. She stepped outside, and her world stopped. Mana's family stood around the fire pit in a tight circle. His father, his brother Davidson, his cousin Daniel, all 3 of them dressed casually, like this was just another Sunday afternoon. But their faces told a different story. They were smiling, grinning even, like they'd just won something. Her husband Man stood off to the side, arms crossed over his chest, staring at the ground. He didn't look at her. He didn't move. Mary's eyes drifted to the fire pit. Flames roared inside, licking the air, bright and angry. And in Man's father's hand, held high like a trophy, was a piece of paper. Her breath caught. It was her marriage certificate, the original, the one she kept locked in the bedroom drawer, the one only she and Mana had keys to. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "How did you get that?" Davidson turned toward her, his smirk wide and smug. "Mana gave us the key." Mary's stomach dropped like a stone. Her gaze snapped to her husband. He still wouldn't look at her. His jaw was tight. His hands gripped his arms, but he said nothing. "You planned this," Mary said, her voice trembling. Mana's father chuckled, low and cold. He held the certificate up between both hands, making sure she could see it clearly. "You've outlived your usefulness, Mary." Then, without hesitation, he tore it in half. The sound was sharp, final. "No," Mary gasped. He tossed both pieces into the flames. Mary screamed and lunged forward, her hands reaching desperately toward the fire. But Daniel stepped in front of her, blocking her path with his body. He was taller, stronger. His grin didn't waver. "Let it burn," he said softly, his voice mocking. "Just like your future." Mary's knees buckled. She stumbled back, her eyes locked on the fire as the paper curled and blackened. The ink disappeared. The signatures vanished. Her proof, her identity, her entire marriage. Gone. Behind her, Davidson laughed. Man's father dusted off his hands like he'd just finished taking out the trash. And Man, her husband, the man she'd loved and sacrificed everything for, still stood there in silence. He didn't defend her. He didn't stop them. He didn't even look her in the eye. Mary's chest heaved. Her hands shook. And for the first time in 10 years, she realized the truth. She had never been family to them. She had been a tool. And now, They were throwing her away. They didn't stop with the certificate. Before Mary could even process what she'd just witnessed, Davidson turned and walked back toward the house. He disappeared inside for a moment, then returned dragging a cardboard box. It scraped against the ground as he pulled it across the patio. Mary's heart sank. She recognized that box. "Found these in the attic," Davidson said cheerfully, lifting the lid. Inside were her personal documents, old photos, letters from her family, things she'd packed away years ago for safekeeping. "No," Mary whispered. "Don't." But Davidson didn't even look at her. He reached in, grabbed a handful of photos, and tossed them into the fire. One by one, they curled and blackened. Her childhood, her parents, her past, all of it disappearing into ash. Mana's father stepped closer to the flames, his face lit by the orange glow. He shook his head slowly, mockingly. 10 years you played housewife, cooking, cleaning, taking care of my ungrateful son. And for what?" Daniel laughed, loud and sharp. "She thought she was family." Mary's throat tightened, her vision blurred with tears, but she refused to let them fall. Not in front of them, not now. Davidson reached into the box again. This time, he pulled out something smaller, something that made Mary's blood run cold. Her jewelry box. "This too," Davidson said, holding it up like it was nothing. Mary's voice cracked. "No, please, those were my mother's." He didn't hesitate. He tossed the entire box onto the coals. Mary screamed. She lunged forward again, but Daniel grabbed her arm and shoved her back. The jewelry box landed with a dull thud, the wood splitting from the heat. Inside, the few pieces her mother had left her began to melt and warp. Her knees gave out. She collapsed onto the stone patio, staring at the flames, unable to breathe. And then finally, Mana spoke. "Just go, Mary." His voice was flat, cold, like he was talking to a stranger. Mary turned her head slowly, looking up at him through the haze of smoke and tears. "What?" Mana still wouldn't meet her eyes. He stared at the ground, his arms still crossed. "My family's right. This was a mistake." The words hit her like a slap. She had given him everything. Her career, her independence, her time, her youth. She had cared for his mother when no one else would. She had cooked every meal, cleaned every room, supported every dream he ever had. And now he stood there and called her a mistake. Mana's father stepped closer, towering over her. His shadow fell across her face. "You have 1 hour," he said slowly, making sure every word landed. "Pack a bag. Leave. Or we call the police and say you're trespassing." Mary looked up at him, then at Davidson, then at Daniel. All three of them stared down at her with the same expression. Disgust. Triumph. Like she was nothing. And behind them, Mana turned his back and walked into the house. Mary stumbled through the back door, her legs barely holding her up. Her chest felt tight, like something was crushing her from the inside. She moved through the hallway without seeing it, her vision blurred, her mind spinning in circles. She climbed the stairs slowly, gripping the railing for support. Each step felt heavier than the last. When she reached the bedroom, she pushed the door open and stopped. The room looked the same as it always did. The bed she made every morning, the dresser she dusted every week, the curtains she'd sewn herself. But now it felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. Mary sank to the floor, her back against the bed frame. She pulled her knees to her chest and stared at nothing. Years of memories flooded her mind all at once. She remembered the day she agreed to marry Man. She'd been working as a legal assistant at a small firm. It wasn't glamorous, But it was hers. She was building something, a career, a future. But Man's family had insisted she didn't need to work. "We'll take care of you," they'd said. "Your family now." So she quit. She gave it up. For them. And what did they give her in return? She cooked every meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, every single day for 10 years. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, week after week, without complaint. When Manna's mother got sick, Mary was the one who cared for her. 2 years of hospital visits, medication schedules, sleepless nights. She held that woman's hand when she took her last breath. Not Manna, not his father, not Davidson or Daniel, her. And when Manna's father needed help with his business paperwork, who did he call? Mary. She spent hours organizing files, balancing accounts, fixing mistakes. She never asked for payment. She thought she was helping family. When Daniel struggled in college, she tutored him. Late nights at the kitchen table, going over essays and exam prep. He passed because of her. When Davidson defaulted on his loans and his credit tanked, Mary sat down with him and rebuilt it. She made phone calls, negotiated with creditors, set up payment plans. She saved him from financial ruin. She gave everything, and they took everything. Mary closed her eyes, and the insults came rushing back. "You're lucky Manna married you." His father had said that more than once, always with a smirk. "You're not that pretty." Davidson, laughing over dinner like it was a joke. "At least you're useful." Daniel, casual, like it was a compliment. She had stayed quiet every time. She swallowed the hurt. She convinced herself that love meant sacrifice, that if she just worked harder, gave more, proved herself, they would finally see her as family. But now, sitting on the floor of a bedroom that was never really hers, Mary understood the truth. They never saw her as family. She was unpaid labor, a servant who didn't cost them a dime. And now that they were done with her, they wanted to erase her completely. The bang on the bedroom door was so loud it made Mary flinch. 30 minutes left. Davidson's voice came through the wood, sharp and mocking. Mary sat frozen on the floor, her back still pressed against the bed frame. Her breath came in shallow gasps. 30 minutes. That was all the time she had left in the place she'd called home for a decade. Below her, voices echoed through the floorboards. Loud, casual, like they were planning a party instead of dismantling her life. "I'll take the TV," Daniel said. His voice drifted up from the living room, clear as day. "She won't need it," Davidson replied, laughing. Mary closed her eyes, her jaw clenching. They were dividing her belongings. Right now, like she was already gone. Then came another voice, Manny's father, calm, businesslike. "Yes, I need to confirm something," he said. Mary realized he was on the phone. "If there's no marriage record, she has no legal claim to anything, correct? No property, no assets, no alimony." Mary's stomach twisted. There was a pause. Then Man's father chuckled. "Perfect, thank you." He hung up, and then he laughed. A deep, satisfied laugh that made Mary's skin crawl. "Told you," Davidson said, from somewhere below. "She's got nothing." "Absolutely nothing," Manna's father agreed. Then Davidson's voice grew louder, like he'd moved to the bottom of the stairs. "And don't even think about going to the courthouse, Mary," he shouted up toward the bedroom. "We already paid someone to wipe the records." Mary's chest tightened. Her breathing quickened. Panic clawed at her throat. They had thought of everything. They burned the certificate. They bribed a courthouse clerk. They erased her from the system. No proof, no paper trail. No witnesses who would stand up for her. She had nothing, In 20 minutes, they would throw her out, and she would walk away with nothing but the clothes on her back. Her hands trembled in her lap. Her vision blurred. The walls felt like they were closing in. But then something shifted. Her hands stopped shaking. Her breathing slowed. Because in the chaos of her spiraling thoughts, a memory surfaced. Quiet, clear, certain. She remembered something they didn't know, something she'd done years ago, back when her mother's voice still echoed in her mind. Always protect yourself, Mary. Men and their families can change. Mary had listened. She had been careful. She had prepared. And now, sitting on the floor of a bedroom she was about to lose, Mary realized something that made her pulse steady for the first time in an hour. They thought they'd erased her, but they were wrong. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her jaw set. And for the first time since she'd walked into that backyard and seen the flames, Mary felt something other than fear. She felt resolve. Let them think they'd won. Let them celebrate. Because in 20 minutes, she would walk out that door, and they would have no idea what was coming. Mary rose to her feet slowly, her legs steadier now. She walked across the room to the closet and opened the door. Her hands moved with purpose, pushing aside jackets and coats until she reached the back corner where a stack of winter clothes sat folded on the shelf. She pulled them down carefully. Underneath, hidden from view, was an old shoebox, plain, unmarked, the kind no one would look at twice. Mary lifted the lid. Inside was a small key. Her fingers closed around it, and for the first time in hours, she felt something close to calm. She turned and walked to the bed, kneeling beside her old suitcase stored underneath. She pulled it out, unzipped the lining along the inner edge, and slid her hand into the hidden compartment. And there it was, a certified copy of her marriage certificate, sealed in plastic. Pristine, untouched. She had stored it there the day after the wedding, just in case. Her mother's voice had been in her head that morning, quiet but firm. Always protect yourself, Mary. Men and their families can change. Mary had listened. She set the certificate on the bed and reached back into the compartment. Her fingers found something else, a USB drive, small, black, innocent looking. But what was on it was anything but innocent. Recordings, every insult, every threat, every cruel comment made when they thought she wasn't paying attention. She had started documenting things 2 years ago, when the tone in the house began to shift, when the smiles became thinner, when the kindness dried up completely. She wasn't paranoid. She was careful. Mary stood and walked to the desk in the corner. She opened her laptop and powered it on. The screen glowed to life. She logged into the first email account, then the second, then the third. All of them under her maiden name. All of them protected with passwords no one else knew. Cloud backups, scanned documents, bank statements showing every contribution she'd made to the household over the years, receipts for groceries, utilities, repairs, proof of the work she'd done for Man's father's business, proof of the tutoring, proof of the caregiving. She had kept everything. Mary scrolled through folder after folder, her eyes scanning the files. It was all there, every piece of evidence she would need, every record, every transaction, every word. She sat back in the chair, her hands resting on the keyboard. Her chest rose and fell with slow, deliberate breaths. Downstairs, she could still hear them, laughing, dividing her things, planning their next steps. But they had no idea. They thought they'd erased her. They thought she was powerless. They thought she would walk out that door broken, defeated, with nothing to her name. They were wrong. Mary's fear, the panic that had gripped her just minutes ago, turned cold, hard, sharp as glass. Let them think they won. Let them celebrate their victory. Because when the time came, she would show them exactly what happened when you underestimated the woman you tried to erase. Mary walked down the stairs slowly, one hand gripping the railing, the other holding a single small bag. It was light, almost empty, just a few clothes, a toothbrush, nothing more. At the bottom of the stairs, the three men stood waiting. Mana's father near the front door, Davidson by the living room entrance, Daniel leaning against the wall, arms crossed, grinning. Davidson's eyes flicked to the bag in her hand. He let out a sharp laugh. "That's all you're taking?" His voice dripped with mockery. "Pathetic." Mary didn't respond. She didn't even look at him. Her face was blank, her expression unreadable. She just kept walking. Mana's father stepped forward, his smirk widening. "Smart girl," he said, his tone condescending. "Leave quietly, and we won't press charges." Mary's eyes moved past him, scanning the room. And then she saw Man. He stood in the corner near the window, hands in his pockets, staring at the floor. He hadn't moved since she came downstairs. He wouldn't even look at her. Mary stopped walking. She turned toward him fully, her gaze steady. "You'll regret this," she said softly. Manor finally looked up. His face was cold, detached. He let out a short, bitter scoff. "I doubt it." Mary held his gaze for a long moment. Then she turned and walked toward the door. But before she reached it, she paused. Her hand hovered over the doorknob. She took a slow breath, then turned back one last time. "I have a question," she said, her voice quiet but clear. The room went silent. All three men stared at her. Mary looked directly at Man. "Did you ever love me?" The silence stretched, long, heavy, uncomfortable. Man's jaw tightened. He shifted his weight, glanced at his father, then back at Mary. Finally, he shrugged. "Does it matter now?" Mary stared at him. Her chest rose and fell once, twice. Then she nodded slowly. "No," she said. "I suppose it doesn't." She turned back to the door, pulled it open, and stepped outside. The cold air hit her face. The door swung shut behind her with a soft click. Inside, the three men stood frozen for a beat. Then Daniel burst out laughing. "That was easier than I thought," he said, shaking his head. Davidson walked over to the side table and picked up a glass. He raised it in the air with a grin. "To freedom." Mana's father chuckled and lifted his own glass. They clinked them together, the sound sharp and celebratory. Mana stayed where he was, staring at the closed door. But after a moment, even he turned away. None of them noticed the small recording device sitting on the bookshelf near the window, tucked behind a picture frame. A tiny red light, blinking softly in the corner, still running. Mary checked into a small hotel on the edge of town. The room was plain. A bed, a desk, a single chair. But it was quiet, and it was hers. She set her bag down and locked the door behind her. Then she pulled out everything she'd hidden. The marriage certificate, the USB drive, her laptop. She spread it all across the bed, in neat rows like pieces of a puzzle finally coming together. Marriage certificate, financial records, recordings, witness statements from neighbors who'd seen her working, caring, sacrificing, photos of her belongings still in the house. Everything. Mary sat on the edge of the bed and stared at it all for a moment. Then she picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Mary?" Her throat tightened. "Mr. Harrison, it's me." Her former boss, the lawyer she'd worked for as a legal assistant, listened as she explained everything. The fire, the threats, the erasure. When she finished, there was silence on the other end. Then he spoke, and his voice was sharp with anger. "They committed fraud, document destruction, theft. Mary, you have everything you need." She closed her eyes and nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "I know. I'll help you," he said. "Let's bury them." Over the next week, Mary worked in silence. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She moved with precision. Like she was back at the law firm, filing case after case. She filed legal claims. She contacted the courthouse directly and provided her certified copy of the marriage certificate. The clerk, who'd been bribed, was flagged. An investigation opened. She froze the joint bank accounts. Every dollar man thought he had access to was locked. She filed a police report for stolen property. Her car, her jewelry, her personal documents, all of it documented, all of it evidence. She requested restraining orders, one for each of them. And through it all, Mary stayed quiet. She didn't post online. She didn't tell anyone where she was. She worked in the shadows, building her case brick by brick. Meanwhile, across town, Manny's family grew comfortable. They sold Mary's car within days. Davidson pocketed the cash and bragged about it over dinner. They threw away her photos. Every picture of her, gone, like she'd never existed. They redecorated the house. New paint, new furniture. Manny's father called it a fresh start, and they posted on social media. Smiling photos, captions about new beginnings and moving forward. Friends liked the posts, commented with support. No one asked where Mary went. They had no idea. Mary watched it all from her hotel room. She scrolled through their posts, her face expressionless. She saw the photos, read the comments, watched them celebrate. And she didn't react. She didn't rush. She didn't lash out. She didn't make a single move that would tip them off. She let them bury themselves deeper. Because the deeper they went, the harder they would fall. And Mary was patient. She had waited 10 years in that house. She could wait one more week. The storm was coming, and they had no idea it had already begun. 2 weeks later, Manny's father hosted a family gathering. The house was full, friends, business partners, colleagues from his company. The dining table was set with expensive china. Wine flowed. Laughter echoed through the rooms. It was a celebration, a toast to moving forward, to new beginnings, to freedom. The guests mingled in the living room, glasses in hand, smiling and chatting. Man stood near the window, nodding along to a conversation he wasn't really listening to. Davidson leaned against the bar, telling a joke. Daniel refilled his plate at the buffet table. Everything was perfect. Then, mid-dinner, the doorbell rang. The room didn't quiet immediately. A few people glanced toward the door, but most kept talking. Manny set his glass down and walked to the entryway, pulling the door open with a casual smile. The smile vanished instantly. Mary stood on the doorstep. She wore a tailored suit. Her hair was styled. Her posture was straight, confident. Her eyes were sharp and focused. And behind her stood 2 police officers in uniform. Next to them, a man in a gray suit carrying a leather briefcase. Manny's face drained of color. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Mary didn't wait for an invitation. She stepped forward, and Manny stumbled back. She walked into the house like she owned it, because legally, she did. The conversation in the living room died. Heads turned. Glasses paused mid-air. Every eye in the room locked onto Mary. She stopped in the center of the room and looked around slowly, taking it all in. Then her gaze settled on Manny's father. "I'm here to reclaim my property," she said. Her voice was calm, clear, unshakable. Davidson shot to his feet, his face twisting in anger. "You have no right." Mary's lawyer stepped forward, cutting him off with a raised hand. His voice was sharp and professional. "She has every right. Legal marriage certificate, registered and certified. Financial records proving joint ownership, and evidence of fraud, theft, and coercion." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. He handed them directly to one of the police officers. Manna's father stepped forward, his face red, his hands trembling. "We destroyed those papers," he stammered. "There's no proof. We made sure—" Mary smiled. It was cold, controlled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You destroyed copies," she said softly. "I kept the original." She paused, letting the words sink in. "And every recording of what you did." The room went completely silent. No one moved, no one breathed. Then the whispers started, low, confused, shocked. One of the guests, a business partner of Manny's father, stood abruptly. He set his glass down on the table, his face tight. Without a word, he walked toward the door and left. Others followed, one by one. They filed out, avoiding eye contact, murmuring excuses. Mary didn't move. She stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the wreckage of their celebration, and watched them all leave. The courtroom was cold and quiet. Mary sat beside her lawyer at the front table, her hands folded in her lap, her expression calm. Across the aisle, Manna sat with his father, Davidson, and Daniel. Their lawyer shuffled papers nervously. Mary's lawyer stood and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to present audio evidence." He pressed play. The first voice that filled the room was Man's father, cold, cruel. "You've outlived your usefulness." Then Davidson. "She's got nothing now." Then Daniel laughing. "Let it burn, just like your future." The recordings played one after another. Every insult, every threat, every mocking word. The courtroom listened in silence. The judge's expression hardened with each passing second. When the recordings ended, Mary's lawyer presented the rest: the marriage certificate, the financial records, the police report, the witness statements, everything. The judge reviewed the documents carefully. Then he looked up. "I rule in favor of the plaintiff," he said. His voice was firm, final. The house was Mary's, 50% of all marital assets, full restitution for her stolen property, and restraining orders against all three men: Man, his father, Davidson, Daniel. They were ordered to stay away from her, permanently. Manna's face went pale. His father's jaw tightened. Davidson stared at the floor. None of them said a word. The fallout came fast. Manna's reputation collapsed within days. His business partners heard the recordings. They cut ties immediately. Contracts were cancelled. Deals fell through. His name became toxic. Davidson lost his job when the recordings went public. His employer released a statement distancing themselves from him. He couldn't find work anywhere after that. Daniel's college launched an investigation after Mary reported financial aid fraud. They found proof he'd lied on his forms. He was expelled, his degree revoked, and Man's father faced criminal charges: document destruction, conspiracy, fraud. The case moved forward without Mary's involvement. She didn't need to be there. The evidence spoke for itself. Mary didn't attend any of their hearings. She didn't watch. She didn't follow the news. She was done with them. She sold the house within a month, took the money and moved to another city. A fresh start, a clean slate. She restarted her career. This time, she didn't stop. She didn't sacrifice. She built something for herself, and she was stronger for it. 1 year later, Mary sat across from a reporter in a bright, modern office. She was a legal advocate now, helping abused spouses navigate the system. The interview aired on a local news channel. Across town, man saw it. He was sitting alone in a small apartment, flipping through channels. And there she was, confident, successful, thriving. He picked up his phone, typed out a message, hit send. It bounced back. Blocked. Mary never looked back. The lesson was clear. Cruelty leaves evidence. And the people you underestimate are the ones who remember everything. Burn the papers, not the woman who kept the receipts.